Yo, what is up everyone, my name is Jack Krause and welcome back to the episode of Inside the Lines, Hear Me Out, the show where I give my thoughts and opinions around the world of motorsports. Today's episode is going to be referring to NASCAR's audience. Now my thoughts on this kicked into gear after Saturday night's Federated Auto Parts 400 from Richmond Raceway, the second race of the NASCAR playoffs. I thought it was a good race. It was a lot of tire management. There was tire follow-up, pit strategy throughout the race, comers and goers in every stage, storylines that developed throughout the race. I thought it was a pretty good race, at least in my opinion. So when I went to see and go on Jeff Gluck's Twitter page for his Was Richmond or Was It a Good Race, I was surprised by how many people said no. According to yesterday afternoon, because I had to set up and get ready for this recording, at that time, no was 56.1% and 43.9% said yes. And the amount of comments of people that talked about the race, I was really kind of surprised at. Things that make a bad race: driver leads the majority of the race, no incident cautions, winner is someone no one cares about. Please, dear sweet baby Jesus, do not let the new Autoco Speedway be like Richmond tonight. The passing is great, but the lack of cautions is concerning. Keselowski ran away with the race. A good race has to have actual competition and some drama/strategy. An overtly dominant race car kills a great race, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Now, don't get me wrong, that was just a snippets of information that I took from social media. I know going on social media for opinions is like going way down below to the Mariana Trench. It's the worst of the worst on social media. But I was really surprised by how many people say that, that they put zero cautions as a reason, that how there was a little passing, and again, I didn't use all of it. I just took, certain people. I can't get everyone's opinion, but a lot of people said no passing, leader was out in front so much. But when you take a look at the graph and some of the statistics from that race, it actually favors Richmond. When you take a look at lead changes, 2020's race on Saturday night had the most amount of lead changes since all the way back in 2008. Now, yes, I know that graph can be a little bit misleading because, with leaders, it could be just for one lap and then they go to pit road when green flag pit stops are taking place or when a restart is taking place. So that's why take a look at this graph of quality leaders. So this is when leaders are actually leading for a good amount of laps. 7.0. That number is at its highest since 2013 when it was at a 9.0. And it had the same amount of quality leaders as 2017 to 2018. Take a look at green flag passes per lap. 6.7. Highest since 2017 when it had a 7.2. So Richmond had a lot of ups in terms of statistics. More green flag lap passes, more quality leaders, more lead changes in quite some time. But yet still some people viewed it as not a good race. Again, this is your opinion. I'm not saying you're wrong to not agree with my statement. If you don't think Richmond was a good race, that's fine. But I think this creates a much deeper problem with the perception NASCAR created with its, let's just say, newer fan base. And that comes from this tweet by Race Crazy, or Steven. He said, "The race wasn't dreadful by any means. Better than high downforce. Just not a lot of action/surprises that usually make NASCAR the entertainment sport it is." Keep that in mind. The entertainment sport it is. Now, this brings me back to what J.R. Hildebrand said a few days ago, I believe, before the Richmond race, when he talked about on how he perceived each of the top three divisions of motorsports. He said that Formula One is like the pinnacle of motorsports, where the highest form of technology and everything. IndyCar is where real drivers race, and NASCAR is really for the entertainment part of motorsports. Now that already piqued my interest, especially when we saw what took place in yesterday's Tucson Grand Prix in Mugello for Formula One. There was I think 8 cars did not finish the race, all crashed, including a massive accident on the front stretch right before they even made it past start finish line. I think 3 or 4 cars were involved in a huge accident. And some of the comments on social media were quite shocking. A lot of people saying that this race was like watching a NASCAR race at Daytona, or this was a race at Talladega, or that this race had so much cautions they thought it was NASCAR, or they thought it was NASCAR because they can't stop running into each other and race. Yeah, it was kind of shocking to see that many people compare that race, or at least that crash, to NASCAR, which then brought me to this question. Does many people believe that NASCAR is just crashing, flipping, tempers flaring, people getting angry? Is that really what they perceive of NASCAR? And then as I started to think about it more and more, I believe that NASCAR has created an environment, created a sort of a perception that has spoiled its fans of what a good race is. Now, what I mean by that is when you take a look at everything that NASCAR has done throughout the years, if you look back at the 90s, which in my opinion, this race was a throwback to. It was a throwback to the 90s. Long green flag runs, no phantom cautions or the debris cautions that we all love. It was just a classic race. Tire management, pit strategy, fall off, different storylines, different comers and goers throughout the race. Yeah, one driver dominated the race, but just because a driver dominates, that doesn't mean it's automatically a bad race. You could have a driver lead the most laps, be flat out dominant, and still have a very fun race. But yeah, when you look back at the 90s, everything was still, in terms of NASCAR's perspective, much more pure than today's standards. There was no stage racing, no playoff grid, no double file restarts, no green, white checkered rules, no overtime lines, none of that. And then once Brian France took over near the end of the 2003 season, we started to see the chase for the cup implemented. We then started to see green, white checkered rules implemented, because back then, if a race is scheduled for 500 miles, it ran to 500 miles. Now it can go up to 505, 508 miles. The introduction of boys have at it to, I guess you could say, kind of encourage drivers to fight, or at least be more aggressive with each other. Having a much more simplified points format in 2011 to make the point standings much more closer for entertainment. Double file restarts to make the restarts more entertaining. The playoff grid in 2014. With the championship winner-take-all format at the end of the season. 2017 with stage racing, where the literal goal of stage racing was to make the early to mid stages of a race much more exciting, to force drivers to race harder. I think when you make all of those changes in such a short amount of time, I believe it's going to create a perception, especially to newer fans, that, hey, NASCAR making all these changes to make exciting racing, then shouldn't every race be exciting? Now, that might sound crazy at first, but think about it. This race did not have anything that NASCAR sort of prepped for. There was no drama storylines like NASCAR has been trying to make, aka the playoff grid. There was no cautions or debris cautions that NASCAR has been doing these past, 4 or 5 years. Stage racing, which was used as a way to sort of force drivers to race harder with beating it and banging, that really didn't happen. Some races is more aggressive or more, I guess you could say, active than others. Just a short track should not determine that. Now look, ever since the COT/Gen 6 era began at Richmond, it has not been the best. It's been a hit or miss. But this race I felt like was one of the better races. If you want to go to Gen 4 era, then fine. You can make that argument that Gen 4 era at Richmond was much better. But even then, sometimes Gen 4 races have had races just like this. So it's sort of hypocritical that, hey, you want to go to the 90s, but then when you see a race that a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people have said is a throwback to the 90s, you don't like. And again, I should reiterate, if you did not like the Richmond race, that is completely fine. I'm not bashing you for it. However, I do think that NASCAR has created a perception with all these changes that they have made in recent years to sort of build this idea that every race should be beating and banging, bumper to bumper, crashes, cars flipping, whatever, photo finish side by side at the end. It doesn't help when the commercials are literally promoting crashes and cars flipping. Fox Sports. When you do that, show crashes, show cars side by side to the finish, show, people getting pissed off. Yeah, the fan is gonna expect that that's what should happen at every race. Now, like I said, some races might be more physical, might be more action-packed than others. I felt like the Richmond race on Saturday was a much more mathematical, strategical race. Again, there was not really a lot of action up front, but there was more action behind the scenes. Again, when you take a look at pit strategies, especially what Kevin Harvick did, I think around stage 2, and how that played a role at the beginning of stage 3, and how drivers attacked that stage, and whether to do two stops or one stop. The different storylines, like with Austin Dillon trying to charge his way through the field, Denny Hamlin struggling, Kevin Harvick trying to rebound after getting a penalty on pit road. There were storylines. You can't deny that, but I guess there wasn't any of that big-time storylines that NASCAR has been hyping up for so long that fans expect. And this leads into my final question. And it's a simple question, but doesn't really have a definite answer. What counts as a good race? Is it the amount of cautions there is in a race? Is it the amount of action that takes place on the racetrack? Does that count as a good race? Does it count if 3 different drivers have a shot at winning the race compared to maybe just one, like we saw at Richmond with Brad Keselowski? What counts as a good race? You might think, well, it's pretty simple what counts as a good race, but every fan has their own different opinion of what a good race is. There are great races. Perfect example, I think, was Bristol in May. That's a great race, but what's a good race? I think Richmond was a good race, but obviously, I don't speak for everyone. There are other people like the Iceberg, Real Radman. They thought it was a good race, but other people didn't think it was a good race. They thought it was boring because, not for all, but for some, because there was no cautions, because one driver dominates. And so I asked myself this: if one driver dominates, does that automatically make it a bad race? I mean, you could have one driver out there not touching anyone else, but you can also have incredible battles from second place on back. That's why also TV plays a big role in what a good race, if a race can be good or not. If the TV people, the TV production, Fox or NBC, there could be a fantastic race, but if they only show the leader, it can build the perception that it is a bad race. So a TV can also play a huge role if a race can be good or not in terms of analysis and things like that. But I do feel like as the years have gone by and the amount of changes that NASCAR has implemented throughout the years, it created a perception that every race should be exciting to the very end. And I think it has spoiled some of the newer fans of those fans expecting that because of all the changes that NASCAR has made. I mean, if you tell me, hey, we're going to add this, and this, stage racing, playoff grid, double foul restarts, all this stuff to make the racing exciting, you're going to think, wow, all these changes must be very good. We're going to see exciting races every single week. And so then when you don't get that excitement that you expect to happen, obviously you're gonna be left disappointed. That's just how I view it as. Every race doesn't need to be like that. I think Richmond is a good example of a normal race. I think I would take a Richmond style race any day. But yeah, that's where I'm gonna end today's episode of Hear Me Out. Again, I want to ask you guys a simple question. Number 1, do you agree with my opinion? If not, tell me why. And also, what is your definition of a good race? Was it Saturday night's race at Richmond? Was it maybe the event at Bristol in May? What is your definition of a good race? Tell me in the comment section down below. But until next time, my name is JettMDK from MDK, and thank you so much for hearing me out.